because Worcester issued a technical bulletin about this gasket leaking. Why do I do these things on a Saturday afternoon at 4:10? Why? So the boiler is condemned. My wife's gonna go mad. No heating and hot water tonight. Now, the first thing we need to do before we actually service the boiler is a safe to touch test and a visual inspection, because we don't know whether we're going to get electrocuted or not touching this cover. Now, we've only been in this house for about 2 weeks now, and this is the first chance I've actually had to look inside this boiler. It has been giving us a few problems and keeps locking out. So let's get on with it and do this visual inspection and the safe to touch test. Now, the boiler is wired into this fuse spur here. We will check the fuse in a minute, and we can see this light is wired into this socket here. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to check the socket is wired correctly by using my socket and see. This has also got an earth loop impedance tester to see whether we've got an earth or not. So I'm just going to flick it on, and we should get 3 green lights here, which we have, and then we should get a green light here to say everything's correct with the earth loop impedance test. So that's correct. I now have a known supply to test my non-contact voltage indicator. So I'm going to put it in the live supply, and you can hear and see that this is working. I can now test the pipe work in the boiler. So while we're under the boiler, I'll just test the pipe work to make sure nothing is live. Not the best pipe work in the world, but there you go. That's what we've inherited. And we can test the boiler is okay. So, need to now prove that this is still working at my socket, which it is, and so it's now safe for me to take this cover off. Now, to take the cover off, there's just 2 screws here at the top and the dreaded 2 screws down here at the bottom. So I've got my trusty Weir socket set with the screwdriver end in, so I can take these off first. And now for the rubbishy screws at the bottom. Well, surprisingly, they came off. So now we can have a visual inspection inside and see if we can see any faults. So let's have a look inside for any kind of damage. So the gasket looks in good condition. No rippling on the heat exchanger. So everything looks reasonably clean, bar that there, whatever that is. So it doesn't look too bad so far. Now let's take a look at the water set. See if we've got anything leaking here. So the trap needs a good cleaning out, to be expected. There doesn't seem to be any water leaks in here at all. It looks pretty clean. It's even got the green guttering on it. So that's the visual inspection, and there doesn't seem to be anything untoward. Now let's turn off the power supply and check the fuse. So the fuse is a 3 amp, so that's good. Now, first thing I'm going to check is the sump down here to see if there's any debris in there and when the last time this boiler was serviced, because this will be a big telltale sign to see whether it's been serviced recently. there you go. You can see there's quite a bit of debris in there. So that's a bit worrying that this hasn't been serviced in a long time. So we've got to get all that out now. Now you can see that's a lot better. Get all the loose bits out with water later when we flush out the heat exchanger. So let's get the trap cleaned out. So I've protected the board with a towel to get this condensate trap out. First thing I need to do is get this rubber pipe disconnected off here, which feels like it's never been off. That's that bit off. Under here there is a nut which I need to undo. And now we can see the trap has got plenty of debris inside it, which we need to get out. So you can see the trap is a lot cleaner now, and I have left it still full of water. Just got to get it back in now. Now before you put the trap back, you just got to make sure that that seal there is in the right place, and it's still there. So that's the trap back in. Now before you put the sump cover back on, just make sure that the gasket inside there is in good condition. It's not damaged or missing, because otherwise you will get it leaking here. Now Worcesters have a test point here on, basically it's the fan pressure test point. And what this does is it allows us to see whether the heat exchanger needs stripping. Now, this is an LPG 28i Green Star Junior, and it needs to be greater than minus 4.6 millibars. So I've got my little digital manometer, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to remove this cap like that. I'm going to place this over there like that. I'm going to turn the hot tap on, and I'm going to see whether I get less than 4.6 millibars reading on here. Now if I get more than 4.6, it means I don't need to strip this. But if it's less than minus 4.6, then I will need to strip it. But I am going to strip it anyway, because I need to look inside. So let's get a tap on and see what it reads. So you can see it's reading 4.3, 4.4. So that's saying it's just outside the readings. I'm going to strip it and clean it, and then we'll see what readings we get after it. So this is how you can tell whether the heat exchanger needs to be stripped or not, is by just doing this little test. Now, before you go ahead and remove this heat engine out of this boiler, you're going to require a service kit. And these are the two main components you need when servicing this boiler and removing the burner. So it's this big red gasket, and I've also bought the spark electrodes and flame rectification, which comes as one kit. So this comes as a full kit to replace that, because Worcester issued a technical bulletin about this gasket leaking. So every time you do take this heat engine out, you will need to replace this red gasket. So just need to let the boiler cool down a bit now before I take the heat engine out. So it's time for a brew. Now we've undone that nut. I can just move it to the front like that, and now this burner should twist towards me and lift out, which it does. So that's how easy it is to take the fan, and we're going to look inside here to look at this bearing in a minute, but that's how you get it out easy. So now it just leaves us to get the electrodes off the top plate, and then we can start taking off inside. So we just need to get these ignition leads off, which that's the first one to come off, and then the second one, and then the flame rectification. Well, they came off easy. They're normally a lot harder than that. Now we can take this nut all the way off, if it comes off. So now the nut's off, we can just lift this out of the way. And you can see that gasket is still in reasonably good condition, but we must change it every time we do this. So now we can remove this gasket. And the electrodes. And again, they're not massively worn, these electrodes. They could actually clean up and go back in, but we get them in the kit, so we might as well replace them. So you can see that's the gasket. Now, next thing to remove is the cup burner. This is the hardest thing to get out with one hand, but we'll have a go, because they always get caught on that lip there, look. So I'm going to have to use two hands to get it out as usual. So that's finally out. Let's have a look at the state of it. Whew. That's going to need a cleaning up. It's not damaged, but it will need a good clean. Now inside there is a set of baffles. Now to get those out we need some specialist tools, which I've got, and I'll show them in a second, but we need to remove this plate on the top to allow the specialist tools to slide in. So we just need to undo this screw. Remove the plate, and we should be able to get into there so we can get the baffles out. So you can see the first baffle there, what we've got to get out. So we need to get this special spanner to remove that one. So hopefully you can see this spanner has gone on to the first set of baffles, and we can remove that. So again, needs a good cleaning up, but it's not in massively bad condition. Now, looking at this one, it looks like it's proper stuck inside. Can you see all the aluminium oxide round the back? And I don't think this will come out easy, but let's have a go. Now I've got a screwdriver we can put across here, and let's see if, again, it's hard to do with one hand. Let's see if we can lift it up. Not a chance. Not a chance is that gonna come out. And this is why it's so important that these are serviced. God. Well, that's how well the bottom baffle is stuck in. It snapped my big screwdriver. Now, there'll be loads of guys who'll say, oh, pour Coca-Cola down it and it'll be alright. But I need this back on tonight, so I can't afford to knacker it up. So I'm going to have to put it back together again. And it looks like I'm probably going to end up replacing that heat exchanger. Just because this boiler has probably never been serviced all the time it's been in. And hopefully this shows how important it is that these aluminium heat exchangers require a servicing all the time. Now the manufacturers say if the fan pressure test passes, you don't need to strip and clean it. But if you don't strip and clean it on a regular basis, you can't get the beggars out, and it ends up with a new heat exchanger. Now luckily enough, I've got about 3 or 4 of these at the training centre, and the ironic thing is every one of the baffles come out on the ones in the training centre. And I knew, because this is LPG, because it's a lot hotter, and aluminium heat exchangers are not very good with LPG because it is so much hotter. I just knew it won't come out. Anyway, I'm going to have to put it back together again because we need some hot water for tonight, and then have plan B, which will probably be a new boiler. So the baffle's looking a lot cleaner, so I can put that in at least. So that's got in. So when you come to put the burner back in, the cup burner back in, it'll only go in one way, and it locates on these little pegs in the holes. So it stays flush like that. So they've slightly changed the gasket with the way the electrodes go through the gasket. So that's come already made up like that. But this one hasn't got this retaining clip on the bottom. So this is the old one. And you can see now why it is important to change these, because I don't know if you can see that. It's all broken, cracked up. It's no good. So they now put this clamp on the bottom there to stop any heat getting through. So one of the reasons why we need to change these all the time. And you can tell from the way this gasket is that it's probably the original one. Why do I do these things on a Saturday afternoon at 4:10? Why? And obviously the gasket will only go in one way. So you can see it locates on there. And the electrodes go onto those little clamps there. So you can't get that wrong. Now what I do before I put the fan back in is make sure the electrode leads go back in, because if you don't put them in, it will be an absolute nightmare to try and get them back on. Now we should be able to get the fan back in the gas valve. Another thing I've just noticed, see that big split where the gas tube comes in? This is another fault what happens to them, as long, and the bearing what's in there. So again, it's a good job I've got some of these at the centre and I can just go and replace this tube. But this is what you're up against when boilers are not serviced on a regular basis. So my boiler is condemned. Ah, my wife's gonna go mad. No heating and hot water tonight. Oh. Let's check the bearing inside while we're here. So I need to press that in here and twist it towards me. Oh, that looks brand new. That's okay. This regulates the air and the gas flow. So at least that bit's alright. I can put that back. So it's just replacing that. Now I've taken this off, it's got a hole there as well. So one there and one there. Unbelievable. I just told my wife. It's a wonder you still can't hear her shouting. So got a new tube on there, not split. All I got to do now is put it back on. So let's turn it on and see if it works. So let's make the heating work. Fingers crossed. Oh, there's a little pop when it fired up. So what I need to do now is I need to leave it running for a few minutes, and then I need to test around here. We're doing a sweep test to see if the gasket's okay. I need to flue gas analyse it, and I need to do my inlet pressures. How to set a Worcester 28i Junior LPG to maximum and minimum mode. First thing we need to do is press this spanner button to 10 seconds or till it goes red. Then, using this central heating control knob, we can turn it down here for minimum setting, and you should hear the boiler going to minimum rate. There it goes, you can still see the burners lit, and if you turn it all the way around to here, that will now go into maximum rate. And then to come out the setting, just press the button and it'll go back to normal. So that's how you set a Worcester 28i Junior natural gas or LPG boiler into maximum and minimum settings. So now I've got it built back up again, I'm just going to test the inlet pressures and see if it's made any difference. I guess it won't do. So I've got my TPI app here with my TPI digital manometer. I've connected it back onto the test point. I've put the boiler in maximum rate, and remember we need to be higher than minus 4.6. So I've got this on the minus setting on the actual digital manometer, and you can see it's still the same. So we're on 4.5, just lower than the 4.6. So we need to get those baffles out and give it a good service and a good clean. So now I've connected my TPI digital manometer down here on my inlet test nipple, and it's now giving me a standing pressure of our LPG of 36.7. So again, I need to put this on maximum and see what this drops down to. Now in the book it says an inlet pressure of 37 millibars. Well, we have got an inlet pressure of just less than 37 millibars. Anyway, let's put it back into maximum again. So let's watch and see what it does when it goes into high fire. So we've got 32.3. Now, there's not a lot we can do about this on this LPG. This is the only appliance on this LPG system, and the second stage regulator is just on the other side of that wall. So the 22mm pipe comes straight up and in, and it's still dropping down to 32.4. But there's nothing we can do about this. There's no adjustments we can do on the inlet pressure, because we can't adjust the regulators. So we've gone down to 32.6 on the inlet pressures. Like I say, there's just not a lot we can do about it. Always remember, once you've done a test nipple, bit of leak detection fluid on there to make sure it's not leaking. So now the boiler's been running for a little while, what we've got to do, because we've changed the gasket up here, is we've got to do a sweep test. Now, Worcester have issued a technical bulletin on this, and they say when you change this gasket you must carry out a sweep test. So the sweep test is done with your flue gas analyzer. So I've got my TPI DC710 set up. I've got it on my app here, my ambient CO. I've set it for 2 minutes. So what I've got to do now is I've got to sweep around the top here where the gasket has been replaced, making sure I get around the back and making sure I've not got more than 10 parts per million CO. So let's start the test and see what we get. I'm going to start at the middle here and see if we get anything coming round. So I'll get back to you after the 2 minutes and I'll show you the results. So the test is complete and I got 3 parts per million of CO inside there, which isn't anything for concern, I wouldn't have thought. It's obviously going down now because I've pulled this down. So that's the maximum we got, which was 3 parts per million of CO coming from the top of this combustion chamber. I'm also going to use my cane gas sniffer to see if we've got any gas leaks. So everything looks good inside here. So I can put the cover on now and flue gas analyse it. So I'll put the cover back on, just analysing it in low rate. And I've got my DC 710 on with the app, and it's reading 106 ppm for CO, 12.1 for the CO2 with a ratio of 0.0008. Okay, now remember this is an LPG boiler, so we need to look on the chart to see what our minimum and maximum CO2 should be, but at the moment it's 12.2%. Okay, so now we need to put it in maximum. So we're on maximum and it's not looking good, is it? 1,361 parts per million for CO and a ratio of 0.0113 with 12.6 CO2. Don't really want to be knackering the analyzer, so yeah, I've now got an at-risk boiler. So what a waste of a day this has been, but at least it's shown how bad my boiler is, and we've actually bought a house with a boiler which has never been serviced by the looks of it and needs ripping out. It's the first time ever I've taken a test nipple off on a boiler and it actually be full of aluminium oxide. So it's going off and a new one going in. Condemned. Now, after the disaster of last night, I've come in this morning, I've stripped it, I've put it all back together again, thinking it's something I've done, but no. I think what's happened is, because that pipe was split, the last person who did service this boiler has played around with the settings on the gas valve. So what I've done is, I've spent a good 20 minutes now getting this set up right on maximum and minimum. So at the moment I've got 10.6, it keeps going between 10.6 down to 10.5. It's on 7 now, CO2 with 85 parts per million and a ratio of 0.008. Every time I'm flicking it back to minimum now, it's kind of changing it all the time. So I've just been playing around with it for a little bit, but at least now I've not got those really horrendous CO figures of 1,100 and whatever they were yesterday, and we seem to be modulating quite nice. Well, it's in high fire, but it seems to be working quite nicely now in high fire. It's low fire I'm getting a bit of a problem with, so I'm going to play around with it a little bit more and see what I get at low fire. But it's looking better than it did yesterday. So after about another half an hour of messing around with the settings on the gas valve, I managed to get it somewhere near. So on the maximum setting, I got 187 parts per million of CO, I got 11.5% CO2, and I got a ratio of 0.0016 with a flue temperature of 56.7 degrees centigrade. On the low setting, I got 12 parts per million of CO, I got 10.1 CO2, I got a ratio of 0.0001 with a flue temperature of 45.8 degrees C. So it took a lot of perseverance and messing around, but still my fan pressure settings are still out, so I'm afraid to say the boiler is going within the next week or so when I've got time to change the boiler. But at least it's running a lot better than it was doing. My wife says we've actually got hot water now, unlike we had beforehand, because I don't have a bath, I have a shower, so I don't really notice how hot or cold the water is, but she really did notice a difference after she'd had a bath. But the main thing we can take from this video is servicing. Just racking up to a boiler, putting a flue gas analyzer into the flue and taking a reading doesn't constitute a service in my eyes. Also, adjusting the zero governor gas valve. Now, to me, it's obvious that the zero governor was changed just from flue gas analysing, not from servicing, because obviously what you've seen inside the boiler. So some engineers racked up to this boiler, not noticed that the pipe's been split, and I must admit, I didn't notice it until I took it out, and then started to adjust the zero governor before they've done any other tests. Now really, you shouldn't be adjusting a zero governor. There should be no need to adjust a zero governor unless you're changing the gases from LPG to natural gas or natural gas to LPG, or you're putting a brand new valve in which hasn't been set up. But if you're going out to service a boiler, you certainly don't start adjusting a zero governor before you've stripped and cleaned and checked the appliance, because really there isn't anything to send them out of tolerances. So hopefully on that alone, we've learned when we come to service a boiler, we need to make sure we're actually servicing it, not just flue gas analysing it, which a lot of engineers do now. So look out for the video coming soon on changing this boiler for a new one. Hope you've liked the video, hope you've got something out of it, and I'll catch you on the next one. Cheers.